there, entrepreneurs. My name is Sushant, and welcome to TrepTalks. This is the show where I interview successful e-commerce entrepreneurs, business executives, and thought leaders, and ask them questions about their business story, and also dive deep into some of the strategies and tactics that they have used to start and grow their businesses. And today, I'm really excited to welcome Richard Worsham to the show. Richard is the co-founder and lead designer at Janus Motorcycles, a motorcycle manufacturer building handmade, classically styled, lightweight motorcycles in northern Indiana. And today I'm going to ask Richard a few questions about his entrepreneurial journey and some of the strategies and tactics that he has used to start and grow his business. So Richard, thank you so much for joining me today at TrepTalks. Really, really appreciate your time.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
So very, very interesting product and business that you have started. Maybe we can start off with a little bit about your background. What was your kind of background? Were you into motorcycles before starting this business? And what really kind of motivated you to start a motorcycle business?
Good questions. My background, this is should be encouraging to anyone if you don't have an MBA that you can start a business. I have my background's in literature, and that's an undergrad degree, and then I went to school for a master's degree in architecture right after that, and then about 4 months after I graduated from there, I started Janus Motorcycles. So
Wow.
the kind of in between the lines on that is that yes, I have been interested in vehicles of all types since I was a child. I was lucky to have parents that fostered that kind of appreciation with their own. They had some vintage, vintage vehicles growing up, and took us to a lot of shows. Well, not a lot of shows, but my father would take us to vintage car races and stuff to kind of experience that, and that definitely had left a mark on me. Really appreciated it. And it was really the design part of it that was appealed to me. I was drawing those and thinking about suspension systems and the kind of the aesthetics of the vehicles, especially historic vehicles. And then while I was in college and kind of before I went to grad school, I got interested in small displacement. I wasn't really into motorcycles. I never really saw myself riding them, but interested in like vintage mopeds, honestly, the little dorky 1970s pedal mopeds. And the reason that I appreciated them was is very telling and kind of leads right into Janus. They were easy to work on, not intimidating, and they were fun the kind of community around repairing and maintaining and messing around with them was really active. And I just really, really enjoyed that aspect of it. While I was in school, I worked with a local shop out here in Indiana. I moved to Indiana to go to Notre Dame, which is where my graduate degree is from. And I met a guy out here who had a repair shop, and through hanging out there and then eventually kind of working over the summer, messing around on restoring vintage bikes, we gradually over a number of years built up a network of local craftspeople that could do a lot of the stuff that we needed done, welding, all the different aspects that go into that we would later realize would go into manufacturing for kind of performance and aftermarket parts and restorations. We've built this network up. And so graduated, and shortly thereafter we founded Janus. And really the idea was that we had been working with these older products for a very long time, and we kind of started taking them, and I had started taking different models and like combining them together in these kind of Frankenstein vehicles. And we were trying to kind of come up with this idea of what we wanted it to look like, but we couldn't find that in the real world. And so eventually that turned into kind of just a passion project of let's build a run of 6 of these bikes where we're going to make the chassis, we're going to make the fuel tanks, we're going to make it look exactly the way we want it to. And that was before we founded Janus. We had no idea we were going to start a company. We were just doing it as a fun project for ourselves and friends. And that as well, building that also was part of the impetus for, we built one. We never built 6. We only built one. And local friends, entrepreneurs, and the community were like, hey, this is really cool. You should do something with this. And we were gullible enough to believe them. And we did.
Well, did you ever pursue architecture? Like you were studying architecture.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, if you were very interested in like these things, why not pursue like an engineering degree?
Right.
That probably would have helped.
Yeah. Well, I guess to answer that question, there is an actual thread to that madness. What sounds like disparate, things, but in retrospect, I look back at literature and my interest in architecture, and it's really, there's a fascination with figuring out how craftsmanship and art and theory can continue in the face of change, shall we say. So I was studying traditional literature, some of which went back to 3,000 years ago, like Gilgamesh or something, up to 20th century, The Wasteland or something, T.S. Eliot. And then with architecture, what got me interested and the reason I went there was to study theory. And the theory was basically, how do we continue a study of, or the profession of architecture in the face of what some people might say is a kind of corrosive recent addition to it, which is that it's more kind of like architecture has to be this expression of the architect rather than just being a good building that's in some way, and you really find that success in how we used to do it and in tradition. And so that was really the reason I went there. Not so much, of course, I thought, well, I'll go ahead and my father's an architect. And I thought, well, I'll just do this too. But that's really what I got from that education was, how do we study the past? How do we do things in the ways that have been proven to be successful, but not be stuck in the past? You don't want to be pretending like you're in 19th century Europe or 12th century Europe. You want to be, we're in 2023 here I'm in Indiana, you're in Canada. We are not in some kind of golden age in the past. So anyway, that's been and so when you start thinking about it that way, what we're trying to do with Janus Motorcycles is, how do we do the same thing? How are we trying to recover what a good looking motorcycle actually is, in the face of what I would say is 30, 40 years of downhill as far as motorcycle design, and as far as car design as well. And I think that's one of the reasons we see this huge rebirth in the last 20 years of this so-called retro movement in cars. I'm sure you're familiar with, the Mini Coopers, the Volkswagens, the new Bronco. I think people are starting to kind of think, along those lines. So that's kind of my reasoning. But to answer your question, yes, I did practice architecture for a couple of years. Kind of, this gets into the entrepreneurship really, is when we first started the company, we were not taking a paycheck. And so we were having to rely on alternative streams of income. And one of those for me was working in an architecture firm. And since then, I've also been able to continue that. I'm designing a church right now here in Goshen, but that's really on a side project. So I keep thinking about it. Yeah.
Very nice. Very nice. So basically what you're saying is, initially when, these automobile technologies were new, when people were building them basically custom by hand, there was a uniqueness to it. There was a different design aspect to it. But as this has become more and more commercialized, right? Like, to make it cost effective, there are trade-offs on design. There are trade-offs on, putting that personal touch into it, and it becomes more of a box, or a cookie cutter item.
Yes.
And then
Yes.
what you're trying to do is kind of bring that personal touch to it again.
Absolutely. Really, I think it's not so much that when it was first being done, it was, I'm sure there are a lot of unsuccessful vehicles. Well, we know there are a lot of unsuccessful vehicles and brands early on. It's just that as the tendency has been, especially with technology, has been that it automatically wants to become more efficient and more practical and more mass produced. And so along with that mass production comes a loss of character. And so if you look at early vehicles, they didn't focus so much on efficiency and practicality. They had this flair to them, and really in a way that they were almost like the motorcycle. I think is a fantastic machine because it breaks the mold of every other machine. Every other machine is something that it's just there to be used to affect it's got an efficient cause, and it makes things, or it does this and this and this. A motorcycle, on the other hand, is totally, at least the way we use them in the developed, in the let's just say the US. It's a leisure activity. Nobody has to ride a motorcycle. They choose to do it, and so that in that sense, the motorcycle never has the ability to dominate you. It always is something that it has to have style. It has to look good. And because it's so lightweight and it only has 2 wheels, so much of it has to be exposed. So every part has to look good and function. So it's a marvelous thing. Motorcycles are, even if you don't want to ride one, they're something worth thinking about. And cars used to be like that, but the car, people do need a car nowadays. We absolutely, most cities are built such that you cannot walk where you want to go. So a car is a necessity. And in that sense, it loses all of its character and originality unless you have like a vintage car or something like that. The modern car is it's a big box. Just like you said, it's a box that covers up a bunch of ugliness that is there to, just get something done.
For sure. I mean, I guess, Elon Musk is bringing a little bit more character back with his, what is it called?
Well, you have all the Teslas and the new Cybertruck and all these things. But
yeah,
again,
Cybertruck, yeah.
Unfortunately, I would absolutely put the Tesla in the category of an appliance, not it's a box that looks good on the outside, but the real purpose, if we all replace that with a train that takes you to your work, it's just a more comfortable version. You don't even get to drive it. Whereas with a motorcycle, you have to be in charge of it. You have to be exposed. You have to be engaged with that experience. So unfortunately, I mean, I think he's got it's neat that he's able to do these new things, but it's really just another car.
For sure. So where do you see your product and business? Do you consider it more of a design business, or do you consider it more of a I mean, I'm sure there's specs and functionality in it, but where does it fit in kind of like the whole ecosystem of all the different motorcycles brands out there, Honda and BMW and Husqvarna and all these other brands? I mean, there are high-end brands, there are more utilitarian brands and so forth.
Right. Yeah, that's a great. You mentioned the word specs, and I think that really is a great way of talking about that. We are very unique. I mean, everybody wants to say that, but we really are. it's a lot of people, when they see a Janus or when they see the price tag on a Janus, maybe they just don't get it. They don't understand what we're trying to do. We basically are our for those of you who don't, have not already familiar with Janus, we build handmade, extremely traditional, and for what many Americans would consider, who are used to, big V twins, underpowered. We think it's appropriately powered, but motorcycles that are suitable not for highway riding so much as 2-lane rambling, which is what the activity that we call it, which is just enjoying the activity of riding a motorcycle as a choice you make to do something that's a leisure activity. And not so much as just like we were saying, a utilitarian function. And so really, when we put ourselves, if you were to compare Janus with other brands, it's difficult to do so because we're really at a price point which is more where most people expect those specifications to be performance specifications. And recently we were doing some sales training with our sales team, and we were talking about, what are the objections that we get? And one of our sales, Mitch, our sales guy, said, people want all the bells and whistles, and we don't have the bells and whistles that other bikes have. And I thought I said, Mitch, that is perfect, because the bells and whistles that people are looking for in this world of efficiency and practicality are like digital readouts, infotainment, more power to get to, so that you can go for some reason people think that on a motorcycle you need the ability to go 150 miles an hour or have more horsepower to weigh than your car. Don't ask me why. And so I said, well, the bells and whistles we have are actual, really what I think of a bell and whistle, it's more like these beautiful hand-formed fenders, leather accoutrements, this hand polished, hand machined, all this stuff that's just, and when you see one in person, there's no comparison with, you could park with a line of, much more expensive bikes next to it and it'll take the show, because it's obviously so intricately built by hand, and that shows. So yeah, we are basically in terms of where we sit in the market, we are kind of all by ourselves, both in the type of the product and the scale that we're doing it at. We are about 20 people make up this company. So we're very small. And we produce right now about 300 bikes a year. So you mentioned Honda or Harley Davidson. We're nowhere near that scale. We're in a little, very small niche of bikes. And yeah, it's oh, and then the other thing I was going to say that also differentiates us is that we don't have a dealer network. We sell completely online. Now, I say completely online. People come into the shop and pick up bikes, or you can order one in here at the shop. But for the vast majority of Americans, they don't live in Goshen, Indiana, so they're going to be ordering it online. We have an online configurator where you can spec it out. You can call us, talk to us. I end up talking to a lot of folks. We try and have this very personal connection, and then the product line reflects that, in the sense that the number of options and upgrades and things you can do to the bike is to make it your own is almost infinite. Very rarely do we see two identical bikes leave the shop.
Wow. So is your bike very modular, so that where, if somebody wants to, they bought your bike and then now they want to, let's say, upgrade the engine, or they want to do something to it, like they're able to do it very easily? Is that kind of like one of the value propositions, or?
Well, they are modular, but they're not modular in the way that you just described. They're modular in the sense that they work internally. We can switch. We have all these different options and upgrades that can be easily, essentially bolted on, or they're we bridge this gap between production and custom. Custom motorcycles, people think that somebody's chopped up the frame and made a new, chopper or something like that. Whereas on production, they think it's just mass produced. And what we're doing is kind of combining those two. Every frame is identical. Every fuel tank is identical. every saddlebag is identical, but we have so many different ways that it can be made, that, or colors that can be painted, or polished finishes you can put on it, that it can be customized to you. As far as the ability to add a different engine in and that kind of modularity, no, they're designed for our engine. Yeah, we try and, you know, make sure that we've done a lot of testing on everything so that we know it works on our platform. Yeah.
Okay. What have you learned about your customers? So you're creating 300 bikes per year. Have you noticed any trend in the kind of customer who is interested in this product or this kind of a bike? And are there, well, I'll ask about your competitors after, but yeah, maybe you can share a little bit about your, you know, what you've learned about your customer. Are there any trends?
Yeah, there's absolutely trends that we've been able to identify over. We've been doing this for going on 12 years, I guess now. And, you know, we definitely have folks that are interested in vintage things. So you're going to have folks that are interested in watches or, you know, collecting things. That's one aspect. And that is also borne out in the sense that a lot of our customers, this is not their only motorcycle. It's not their first bike. Some of them have had hundreds of motorcycles. Some of them have had, you know, a dozen. Some of them still have 6 other bikes in the garage, and they want something that does something different, or that is just really unique. And that's certainly the case with our bikes. That's one trend. That can be contrasted with the fact that our bikes are very, very lightweight, and because they're lower powered, they're a very good option for beginner riders. So we do have beginner riders that are buying these bikes ranging in age, but fewer, I would say, young riders. And that's just typical of the motorcycle industry, in the sense that, you know, the older generations have more disposable income. So just like me, I guess, you know, when my first bike is a used 1980s old bike, because that's what I could afford. But we do have younger riders. We have they fit female riders, so we have a contingent of female riders, but probably even more common than that is we have couples who, instead of you know, the wife riding on the back, they've said, oh, we could both get a bike because we can both ride them. They're not intimidating. So we have many couples that own bikes and that have bought them together and spec'd them out together.
Are there other bike manufacturers like yourself in the United States? Like, are there other brands like, you know, your brand, where they're creating like these custom bicycles that are more, you know, design oriented and has a more of a romantic aspect to it rather than more functional aspect to it? And I'm assuming they're not, even if they're not direct competitors, because you're bringing something very unique with your products, and they may be doing something very unique from their products.
Yeah. Really, there is nothing like what we're doing. I would say that the closest you're going to find would be custom shops, and a shop that would be, you'd bring them a bike, a donor bike, or they would source one for you. Say, hey, I want this for me, and I want this, this, and this, and those are typically very expensive, and they're done by an artist, and that artist may be putting out anywhere from one bike a year to, I don't know, some of the really proficient guys are doing, you know, 10 or more, but they're very, very limited. As far as production, there really isn't anything on our scale at the moment. And then as far as performance and kind of design oriented, the closest I would think would be like Royal Enfield, which is an Indian company, and they're actually one of the largest motorcycle manufacturers in the world. So they're similar in the sense that they have this kind of, you know, retro aesthetic. Well, really, it's not even retro. Royal Enfield has been making the same bikes for 50 years. they're just really old fashioned. And they're doing a really great job here in the States. They're neat bikes that are lower power, but they're mass produced on a scale that just is not even comparable to us.
Yeah. I mean, India has a huge motorbiking culture,
It
right?
does,
It's
yeah.
like everybody, even if they have a car, they would have a motorcycle because that's just
And
an
they are
easier.
using them. They
Yeah,
are using
yeah.
them for
There,
practical
yeah,
utilitarian reasons in that sense.
yeah,
Yeah. Which we don't here in the States. We really, I mean, you'll get people who say, well, I ride my Harley to work every day and I don't have a car. Well, I say, well, you chose to do that.
yeah, yeah. It's interesting, that some places have the culture around motor bicycles. Of course, North America does not really, but I think in Europe, of course, in Asia, there is a lot of. I think one reason is, of course, not everybody can afford a car in those areas,
Yeah.
especially in Asia. So I think that motorcycle becomes a mode of transportation, and of course, the infrastructure, the roads are not great always there as well for like
Yeah.
cars. So motorcycles become a more reasonable way to travel.
Absolutely. They're far less expensive to maintain and to operate. They cost less to build. That's certainly Southeast Asia, India are places where they're very popular. Unfortunately, in some places they're being outlawed, or at least with internal combustion engines because of the pollution that they've caused. But yeah, in Europe, you'll see more scooters, which are a more practical kind of way of getting around. They can get away with it because they can cover their clothes from rain or whatever. But
Yeah,
not many people are interested in being that exposed, either to the weather or to traffic,
for
without
sure.
a choice. Yeah.
So of course, I mean, the product is great. It's, there's a story behind it. You have a purpose behind this product. But of course, at the end of the day, you're running a business. I understand you have 4 co-founders. And can you talk a little bit about, when you started out, was there a business plan? I mean, you mentioned that there wasn't really. I mean, you were doing it
Yeah.
as a passion project, but at what point and who kind of decided that we want to make a business out of it, we want to go 100% and really pursue this as a business? And considering that, do you think that do you have the right strategy? Like, I mean, you're focusing on a very niche market. Do you kind of just want to, as a business, focus on that and not become a mass market producer?
Yeah. So I would say, looking back on our trajectory, that we've kind of had almost two startups. One beginning when we started the company, it was just myself and my co-founder, and we came from that moped background, and both of us kind of really self-taught, we had more of the vision of what we wanted to do and less of the business acumen. And I still say that's true. I've learned a lot over the years, but I'm more on the design and kind of vision end of things. Then in 2015, we were joined by 2 other partners who brought marketing and sales and videography to the picture. And that's really where we kind of changed the trajectory. Really when we started, hiring employees, and when we found our own voice with YouTube, and YouTube, we can talk more about that, I'm sure, in a bit, but that's really been that is our dealership. That's allowed us to do what we do, is our extensive YouTube video library of everything from promoting the product, selling the product, to maintaining the product is taken care of on YouTube. So we brought those folks in, and over the years since then, we have learned more about what we're doing. In retrospect, it really was the first beginning was there was no market research. It was completely a passion project in the sense of this is what we want.
Hmm.
And in a lot of ways, I think that did us really well. That served us extremely well because it is a product that is very little competition, and it's a small niche too. But that's a really good place to be doing what we do. As we've grown, we've done more, research and we put more business thought and experience into it. We've added a lot of very experienced business partners over the years in board of directors and investment. But one of the things we started to learn about ourselves is that while we're not an atelier in the sense of like an art workshop where we're just producing one or two pieces, that is where we find the best return for what we're doing. Now, as we grow, our goal is to expand our production. We account for a fraction of a percent of the U.S. motorcycle market. So there's a massive amount of room for growth. But everyone here can do really well, very well, and grow the company. We could be producing, thousands of units and still be a very small handmade company. And that's really where we see the value of Janus. It's not in competing with Honda. So that's really never been our goal and probably never will be. We're going to be trying to do hand pinstriping and machining. That's where we find the value and where our customers do.
I'm assuming that the investors that you brought on, they were kind of aligned with your vision, because many times, like when you have investors, they may want, if they have a different vision, they're like, maybe you should change this and go after a bigger market because that's where the growth is. Have you ever had any of that kind of discussions with your investors?
Not really. No, we've been very both fortunate and I would say probably we've chosen well the investors that we have brought on. We have for the most part until recently had a very local investment group within this county and the next county over, folks who successful manufacturing entrepreneurs who really want to do something different and that's exciting, and they've really given us the reins with that, and that's great. Over the last year, we've kind of expanded that a little bit, and we brought in some more expertise. But at this point, I think when we pitch the company, we're very careful to do so, letting people know what the story is, and if you want to get in, this is what we're doing. We're not trying to, and it's readily apparent when you walk in the shop, when you visit, when you start watching some of our YouTube videos, what the value of Janus is. It's not in trying to be Harley Davidson or Honda. So no, it hasn't been a challenge.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about your manufacturing? So I see on your website, you are kind of very transparent with, where the different parts of your motorcycle come from.
Yeah.
And so how does it work? Like, do you build these motorbikes made to order? So somebody goes on your website. Of course, I see there's a lot of customization options. So you have build and order functionality. Somebody selects what they want in the motorcycle. And then is there like a base version that's, you have like hundreds of them there, and then you can quickly customize those? Or do you kind of, once you get the order, then you start the build process? How long does it take to build a motorcycle from scratch?
Yeah. So we've kind of gone from a really one-off process in the beginning days to where we are now, which is I kind of mentioned that our bikes are modular in the sense that they're modular internally. So when we have let's say a Halcyon, which is our most popular model, Halcyon 250, for example, we've just sold over 1,000 of those as of a month ago. The chassis is identical on every single model, and so we have a system in place, a lean manufacturing system where we have bins that are circulating from our different manufacturing processes. And in our case, because because we have local craftsmen doing a lot of the work for us here in the county. They're actually being driven around in a van around the county, these bins. And so let's say, for example, let's continue with the chassis. The chassis will be welded up, it's sandblasted, it's powder coated. And because all the chassis are the same color, then it comes back to us and it goes and sits on a shelf. But we're not ordering big batches of those. We're ordering them. This constant trickle is going through the system. And we just kind of know how many, based on experience, that we're going to need. And the system, it's this lean system that regulates itself, essentially. And same thing is true of a fuel tank, for example. Even though the fuel tanks are different colors, we have raw ones sitting, just enough sitting on a shelf ready so that we send that out then for whatever color the customer picks. And then it comes back and it'll be pinstriped. So the total time from when you order a bike is about 8 weeks right now. Let's say 6 to 8 weeks, which is really the sweet spot for us. Our kind of customer wants to wait a little bit. They want to know it's being built specifically for them. And 6 to 8 weeks gives us enough time to kind of make sure everything is done on time. So it's a sweet spot. That said, most of that is the stuff that happens before the bike gets built. The bike actually gets built in about 10 hours, the final assembly. But there's a lot of lead up to that before it's built. I should mention that, another thing that makes us really unique is that we don't do everything in-house. So we have this network of local craftsmen that I mentioned. We're in northeastern Indiana, Elkhart County, which is the capital of the RV, the recreational vehicle industry. And so we are blessed with a just incredibly diverse and loaded manufacturing economy with lots of small job shops. So we have a shop that it's not our shop, it's actually a external shop that makes our 250 chassis. We have an external shop that does our sandblasting. We have an external shop that does our powder coating. And so we're working with a lot of local people. It also happens that we're in a area with a lot of Amish community, large Amish community. And so most of the parts that we have made or processed locally are Amish made. So our 250 chassis is actually welded up in an Amish shop off the grid on a generator, which makes us even weirder.
But they don't drive your motorbikes, right? Because they don't.
They don't.
Yeah.
Now, some parts we do manufacture in-house. We're starting to kind of, to use a jargon, we're vertically integrating with our 450 chassis, and we're headed that way with more parts. That's one side of the manufacturing. The other side is that we use a global supply chain. We have our engines coming in from China, our shock absorbers coming in from Australia, our speedometer, tachometers coming in from Germany. The list goes on with lighting coming in from a different spot, brakes from Italy. So it's this very strange combination of what I call hyper local manufacturing mixed with traditional kind of global supply chain. It's a different way of doing things than most people are familiar with.
If it's cost effective, then yeah, for sure.
Yes, it's cost effective at this niche level. We're not, again, trying to make the cheapest motorcycle.
So, you mentioned that you do have a sales team, and given that it is a direct to consumer product, people can go on your website and select the options and things like that. Is there a need, does every sales process require the sales involvement, people kind of talking to the customer, answering questions, or are most of the sales really just people selecting the options and then checking out, basically?
We do get some folks that you'll wake up in the morning and there's a bike sold. Typically that's not the case, that while the modern customer is much more familiar with purchasing online, typically as you mentioned, with a price point like this and with with this level of customization and really the way that we kind of celebrate the involvement of the customer, we really prefer if they call in at least, so that we can walk them through their build. And it's a pretty long purchasing cycle, so we usually have a lot of interchange going back and forth with the customer as they build their bike, and that's really part of the experience. Not only the ordering of the bike, but then when we build the bike, we're updating them with photographs of what, how the bike's coming along, and it is a more involved process. But a lot of folks will find us on social media, where we do a lot of our advertising: Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And then they'll think about it for a while, give us a call, and then we can walk them through how the configurator works, so they can visualize their bike exactly as the way it's going to be made. And then they can go through the financing process with us if they need to, and purchase the bike. And we can handle all the registration work for them, and then of course build, and they'll either pick up the bike in person, which we love it when people do that, or we can ship the bike to their doorstep.
If you are shipping the bike, like, are you charging shipping fees? Like, I would assume that would require.
Yep. Yeah, we have a flat rate for most of the country. If it's closer, we can usually do it for less, and we try and handle that either ourselves or with a handful of select motorcycle transporters that we work with. We don't do LTL. We do a real kind of white glove service.
And your market right now is really just the US, or are you shipping internationally as well?
We can ship internationally. I mean, we can deliver to a US port of your choice, but we are, the automotive industry is heavily controlled by emissions and highway safety for good reason. And so we have not reached beyond our borders in terms of emissions regulations or highway safety. So EPA, California ARB, and we're working on Canada right now because your emissions and highway safety are so similar to the US. We can do that.
What was you said that you did not really have a business background and you had to learn a lot of things, but you have brought on a lot of experts, business experts with different expertise and so forth. What is the most complex part of this business?
That's a good question. The most complex part of the business.
What took the most amount of time to kind of figure out from like a business perspective?
I think figuring the motorcycles out. I mean, you're literally building a vehicle from scratch with a team. You think about when Ford launches a new car or Honda brings out a new bike, it takes years of development time and a massive team and just incredible amount of resources. And we're working with a very limited budget. Typically, let's say our most recent model really involved the input of about 5 people, mostly myself and our engineer, working around the clock. And it took us about 2 years to launch. Really a year to really do most of the engineering. So that's really challenging. Then figuring out the production processes that go into that. Very, very challenging. Of course, our marketing department's going to tell you that's a real challenge. Sales and marketing we're constantly trying to do better at that and figure that out. But we are it is a motorcycle, and those are really challenging to not just bring from a rough idea to a product, but a rough idea to a product that you don't lose money on the warranty.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned marketing. I'm assuming your marketing is not like paid advertising on Google, because, or is it like, are people searching for, custom motorcycles and your
a lot of it actually is. A lot of it is. We do Google, Facebook. Facebook is a huge part of what we're doing, and Instagram, the whole Meta suite. Really, that's and YouTube to the majority of our marketing. Yeah, we're trying to figure out new ways. We're always doing new initiatives. We're putting bikes in airports. We're doing more. We're starting off to potentially work with some motorcycle rental companies to be able to let people experience bikes around the country. So an interesting model. No dealerships.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, you don't really have the capacity to deliver at that level, right? And also like your customer base, because they're so niche, like they fit a certain community, I guess. Like, do you go out and kind of work with like different motorcycling communities, either online or like, where they're kind of, aggregating their racing or, biking
Yeah.
together and things like that?
Great question. Great question. Yeah, you'd think we would. However, we don't. It's really our experience has been that in the motorcycling world, we're so different that certainly you'll get a lot of interest and we'll certainly make sales. But really where we found, and I'll get back to that idea of the category of rambling that I talked about earlier. It's really people that are interested in this idea of enjoying the journey, not just getting to the destination. And so we found a lot of folks that, let's just, for example, at the top of my head would be, mechanical watches. That community, it would be someone who's very interested in what we're doing, because a mechanical watch, your Apple Watch is far better at keeping time and doing a host of activities that your mechanical watch can't even begin to do. But that the automatic watch or whatever you have is so much more meaningful, and that's very similar to what we do. Similar thing with sailboats, or fine wine, or it's and then again, a lot of older motorcyclists who've gotten past that understanding of like, oh, I just need to go 100 miles an hour. They go, no, after riding for 50 years, I realized that I really just like riding a motorcycle, that I get to experience shifting the gears and the wind in my face in a different way. So yeah. We used to do a lot more shows than we do now, and we're constantly experimenting. I'm doing a show out in the West Coast in 2 weeks, but actually that show is not a motorcycle show. It's going to have motorcycles, but it's really a collection of different kinds of things like we're talking about.
So it's kind of like
an
affinity group, right? So, people who are interested in,
yeah,
collectibles
yeah,
and these watches and things like this. I mean, they probably have the money to.
yeah. I don't want to come across as though it's like exclusive or only for the hyper wealthy in that sense. Because you think of watches, you think, $10,000 items. Our bikes are less expensive than most Harley Davidsons. but I think you said earlier something about like a romantic idea, and I think that does, folks that are kind of interested in that. We have customers certainly we have wealthy customers, and we absolutely have customers that finance their bike, and that it may be the nicest thing they have, but it's something that really means a lot to them.
What is the future vision for your business? Do you want to continue doing what you're doing, or do you have like, do you want to add
question.
more products? Do you want to, like, from a business perspective? I mean, I'm assuming you do want to grow your business, like you want to sell more bikes. So what is it?
Right now our goal really is 30 million by 2030. We really want to grow from the scale we are right now to a much larger company selling more bikes with more products. That's absolutely, I talk all about this art and this philosophy, but even at the very beginning of the company, keep in mind that I was not interested in custom bikes or art pieces. So the goal is not here to be making one-off hyper expensive things. It's to build a production vehicle that we can sell at I hope, an affordable price point. And to do that, we need to make more. And that's really what we're focusing on now, is expanding our marketing and sales, expanding our production efforts. And over the coming years, I would hope to launch more products, and really, like we've kind of talked about, expand, but there's lots of room to get 10 times as big as we are right now and still be a tiny speck on the motorcycle horizon, so to speak.
For sure, for sure. In every entrepreneur's journey, there's always mistakes made, lessons learned, failures. Has there been any kind of big failure or something where it was a, big lesson learned where you could have done without it? What did you learn from it? What can other entrepreneurs learn from your mistakes?
It's a good question. Yeah, we've been pretty lucky. We've made many small, errors, but I wouldn't really blame anybody for any massive mistakes. We did have to go through buying out a business partner, which was really my co-founder, it can be challenging sometimes. You have to kind of just keep the business and its benefit first and foremost when you go through something like that. So obviously maybe selecting your business partners carefully is important, but really we wouldn't be who we are without having the team that we've had along the way. Maybe just not trusting my gut enough in some ways is probably the worst error I've made. I know that's probably not the typical response, but
no, I've definitely heard around the partnership aspect of things. It's challenging. With partnerships, it's like when people's vision kind of diverge from each other.
Yeah, especially when it's like two very visionary people.
yeah,
it can be difficult, but yeah, it's also part of the growth of a company sometimes, I think, and certainly in our case, it's both. It was necessary to have everyone. Everyone was a great contribution, and then again, it's also necessary that sometimes you part ways. So, yeah,
for sure. Now I'm going to move on to our rapid fire segment. In this segment, I'm going to ask you a few quick questions, and you have to answer them maybe in a word or two or a sentence. The first one is one book recommendation for entrepreneurs, and why?
My recommendation is actually one of our partners here, and it's the best entrepreneurship book I've read this year, Confessions of an Entrepreneur, Simple Wisdom for Starting, Building, and Running a Business by Mark Zweig, who's actually on our board and a partner, lifelong business entrepreneur and motorcyclist. Great book, whether you're starting off in business or are a seasoned entrepreneur.
Awesome. An innovative product or idea in the current e-commerce, retail, or tech landscape that you feel excited about?
Innovative. Well, I don't really follow tech that much. I'll say there's a brand that I've been looking at. We'll see if I can answer it with this. Called Laurier watches. And they've kind of caught my attention. They're doing something very similar to what we're doing, where they're taking ideas from the past and applying them in new ways. Small company, outsourcing some aspects of the process, insourcing some, and really focusing on design. Really neat company. Lorier.
Awesome. A business or productivity tool or software that you would recommend, or a productivity tip?
I'm going to go real old school on this one and say I use a notebook every day, and I keep one of the things that I've been doing over the last 2 years is instead of taking notes on every single thing that I do, I just take notes on the things that I need to do. And so I have a priorities list, and having it on paper, not on a digital format, works for me. I'm sure other people are different, but it sure is nice when you can cross that off and move on. So if I don't finish it, I just roll it on to the next week.
For sure. Yeah. I enjoy doing that as well.
Very simple.
Yeah. A peer entrepreneur or business person whom you look up to, or someone who inspires you?
Oh, that's a good one, man. Right now, it's the same guy who wrote that book, Mark Zweig. He's been a big part of what I'm doing, and because he's been in it for a long time, I learn a whole lot. learn a whole lot.
Awesome. Best business advice that you have ever received or you would give to other entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's hard to break down, but just for this one, I'll say not over communication, but communication. One of the things I've learned is that the more you communicate with people around you, the more friends you make, really cultivate those friendships. It's exponential what it does for your business. Absolutely incredible. So, remember to write that thank you note, respond to that email, and do it now. Don't do it later. I don't do a good job at this, but when I do, it works.
That's so important. I think that's really kind of the long-term value that you build.
Absolutely. It's critical.
For sure. Well, those were all the questions that I had, Richard. Thank you so much for sharing your time, for sharing your story, sharing some strategies on how you've kind of grew your business. So yeah, thank you so much again for joining me today at TrepTalks. If somebody wants to check out your motorcycles, what is the best way to do that?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. If you would like to learn more about Janus Motorcycles, you can visit our website, janusmotorcycles.com. It's JANUS motorcycles.com. Or check us out on YouTube, which is where you'll learn the most about us, barring, of course, a visit to our headquarters in Goshen, Indiana. But it's been a pleasure. Thanks so much. And look forward to hearing this.
Awesome. Thank you so much again. Really appreciate it.